Eli5. Why is the car's driver's seat not positioned in the middle? Packaging is what has historically driven a side-by-side seating layout. A front engine located relatively close to the passenger compartment requires the steering column to be offset to one side to clear the engine and transmission, while allowing for a relatively simple steering system. Put the engine behind the driver and you can put the driver wherever you want. But by the time that was done regularly, most vehicles had already gone to a side-by-side configuration, and only race cars and very specialized road-going vehicles, the F1 notably, had a center driver position. Bear in mind, cars weren't created from scratch. They were replacements for wagons where the wagon driver did not usually sit in the middle. Whether they sat left or right has its own history, long predating the automobile, based on which side of the road the driver drives on. Napoleon even mandated right-side drive in his territories. This is also the reason that wagon wheels, cars, and trains have roughly the same width. Goes back to wagon ruts in the roads created by the Romans. There are a bunch of reasons. It creates more blind spots for a driver, with the A-pillars metal on either side of windshield blocking more of their field of view at all times. Makes it harder to see over edge of fenders, makes it harder to gauge proximity to oncoming traffic. Limits capacity inside, with no seat for passenger riding shotgun up front. Harder to get in and out. Makes it impossible to use drive-thru at restaurants, bank ATMs, toll booths, etc. Single-person racing cars like Formula 1 and dragsters have the seat positioned in the middle. But for consumer cars it would entirely prevent having another passenger seat in front. For real-world driving there's also more benefit to being positioned closest to the middle of the road, not the middle of the lane, because it gives you a better view of oncoming traffic. That's why if you drive on the right side of the road, the driver's seat is on the left and vice versa. The engine is in the center of the vehicle for balance. It is usually placed in the front of the vehicle for weight distribution. Mechanically it then works best to place the steering column to the left or the right of the engine. So we place the driver toward the center of the road. In special application vehicles like race cars and some construction vehicles, the driver is placed in the center. Oncoming traffic is not an issue in those cases. Everyone has already explained enough, so here's a modern vehicle that has a middle seat. Sure, it's a multi-million-dollar hypercar, but it does have a middle seat. More than anything, I believe getting in and out is the reason they don't use them more. It's hard enough getting into a car that has a really wide dorsal. Having to crawl into the middle would be a pain in the ass. For normal passenger vehicles on the roads with oncoming traffic across a narrow yellow line, it is essential to have the steering wheel on the left. That is especially true if you want to pass a slow vehicle. Having the driver on the left lets you see ahead to see if there are any oncoming cars. I've driven a car where the steering wheel is on the wrong side, and passing is extremely dangerous. The driver's seat isn't in the middle because you couldn't reach the window to use the McDonald's drive-thru. Actually, there are several cars that had central driving positions. It mainly makes sense for specialty driver-focused performance cars, like the McLaren F1 and BAC Mono. Why should it be? There is no benefit for having the seat in the middle, but a lot of reasons for having it to one side. You have better overview of the traffic, you can get in easier, you have place for a different seat at the front. So it's not why is it not positioned in the middle, but why should it be? 1. Having driver on the side allows for a front passenger seat. 2. Having driver on the left allows front passenger to get out safely. 3. Driver on the left sees better into a right turn. 4. Driver on the left less likely to misjudge side clearance with oncoming traffic. Imagine the three stooges sitting side by side in a car with the steering wheel in the middle. If a cop pulled them over and asked who was driving, they would each blame someone else. In real life, if there were two people in front, they could easily shift positions. Being on one side or the other gives you better visual range around the outside of the car than you'd get from the middle. So you can see out the window all the way to the street, and all the way back to the bumper, instead of only having the mirrors. Honestly, I thought the question was why isn't the driver's seat not positioned in the middle of the steering wheel? Because I'm not gonna lie, there have been plenty of cars I've sat in where the steering wheel is slightly off-center from the seat. Because cars are designed to transport the nuclear family of a few decades ago, namely a husband, wife and 2-3 kids. Thus it makes sense to use the space efficiently and move the driver to one side or the other rather than central. It kind of is in the middle. Not in the middle of the car, mind you, but the middle of the road, since the driver's seat is positioned to be nearest the opposite side of the road. Doing it that way also leaves room for another seat. Safety regulations: modern cars cocoon you with airbags and a seatbelt, but it's not possible to do this with center seating. McLaren recently and maybe GMA got away with it only because it was low production limited run cars. Mostly because the benefits of sitting in the middle are very few if at all, when driving out in the real world. Not to mention that cars are for a practical reason of moving people and not just being a hyper-accurate driver. The Tesla Semi has a middle position driver's seat. Apparently with self-driving and a suite of cameras, this is safer for the driver. With plenty of cabin space behind the driver, a passenger does not need to sit in front. A horse's ass X2 is roughly the basis of how wide our roads are. It fits with having 2 seats per row of seats in a car. Also, the middle would make it more difficult to get into and out of the car. When people ask these questions, do they ever take like 5 minutes to contemplate possible answers in their own? Or is this a symptom of the beginning of the death of thought and critical thinking? Stagecoach's carriages had a bench, so it's reasonable that people were used to the side-by-side arrangement and it got carried forward into cars. Cars are just carriages with a motor. Multiple reasons: better visibility of oncoming traffic, better passenger capacity, allows placement of the transmission between footwells, allows window access for the driver. There's mechanical components there. It's not even possible to sit in the middle and the rear seat due to the weird bump in the center. For combustion engines in the front, the new Koenigsegg Jesko has the driver's seat in the middle as well as 2 front passenger seats, one on each side of the driver's seat. Not to mention 2 back seats as well. Among other reasons, it lets the driver interact with ticket and toll booths. It allows a single booth in the middle of the road to service both directions of traffic. Easiest Eli5 ever so that a pair of people can easily sit in front. Bam! Really high-end cars sometimes do have the seat in the middle, and no other passengers. Road legal compliance mostly. The ultimate road car has the driver's seat in the center though, because the driver regularly has to do things that require being close to the side. A drive-thru is probably the best example of this, because in the days of the horse-drawn coach, you needed one person to hold the reins and another guy with a gun protecting the cargo. The Fiat Multipla had 3 seats across the front, so if they were so inclined they could have popped the driver in the middle. Sounds like someone who has never driven or even thought about driving a car. You gain basically nothing but lose a lot. By no means exhaustive, but the BAC Mono, GMA T50, McLaren F1 and McLaren Speedtail all have central driving positions. Imagine having to get in and out of that thing 5 times a day, or negotiating a drive-through window. If you drove car from UK or Japan you would know, it's plain scary and overtaking is impossible. Because the driver, aka person in control of the vehicle, has to directly exit and enter. Have you ever ridden in the front passenger seat of a car?